Hello everyone and welcome to this chapter introduction video. In this video, we're going to be covering two chapters for the price of one. Those are the chapters on interest groups and the media. These are some of the last chapters maybe in your textbook, at least for us it's that way. And as you're looking at this, we want to be thinking about how this, why this happens even at the end of the course, how this in some ways connects all of the things we've been talking about, politics and the people who make policy, and then people, us. And then you have these groups like interest groups and the media, which connect them. And that's going to be what we're talking about here. In some ways, they look out for us, and in some ways, they exert a very large influence over the process. And we're going to show you some things that you can look for in the text. This will give you some ideas of key vocabulary and concepts to look at in your textbook as you're taking notes on these two chapters. They're pretty short, so we've combined them together, but let's dive right in first with three key concepts, three things you want to be looking for. First, you want to be looking for everything you can find about large interest groups. Probably your textbook is going to tell you about how there are so many countless interest groups, but what we really care about in American politics is those big interest groups, because there's some benefits to those large, well-funded interest groups, like the fact that they're well-funded, they have a lot of influence, but there's some drawbacks, some difficulties for those groups, and some difficulties that those groups cause the American people. So look at the pros and cons, we would say, of large interest groups. As you look at the media, I want you to think about the three major roles of the media. Be able to define these, describe them, see some examples in action. Gatekeeping, scorekeeping, sometimes called horse race journalism, and watchkeeping, sometimes called watchdog or investigative journalism. So make sure you look at those three roles. And finally, how the media is changing is really, really crucial to all of this, and how we even get our news. What is the impact of changing media, and what does social media have to do with this? You might think, are they talking about President Trump's Twitter with this? Absolutely. How are politicians using social media? How are people using social media? And how does that change our politics? All of this can come down to the two similar concepts. We might be able to break everything into two different things, which the fact of the matter is, in our country, there's so many millions of people and then very few policymakers. You know, it might have sounded like a lot when we said there's 535 people in Congress, but compared to the millions of people, it's really not that many. And so what we're really interested in these chapters is, how do politicians find out what people think, and how do people find out what politicians think? And you want to notice what the sources of, for us, our news are, and for politicians, what their sources of what their people want, right? A congressman, we know, needs to be concerned about their constituents, but how do they actually find that out? They can't go survey all of their people. Maybe you'll want to draw some connections to the chapter on polling, for instance. But this is why we call these things, the media, interest groups, and even political parties, linkage institutions. Because in these chapters, we're talking about how people and their politicians are connected. And the media and interest groups are just two of the biggest ways that happens. And that also leads into the chapter mantra. When we think about these linkage institutions, your textbook in particular, you're going to be drawn to a lot of the cons, right? Maybe you worry about fake news in the media, or maybe you worry about a few interest groups having way too much money and power. And the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, we do need to be connected to our politicians. We do need the media, because otherwise we wouldn't know what's going on in our government. Countries without a free press struggle with that. We do want interest groups that can represent those causes that a large number of people in our country are passionate about, right? James Madison talked about this in the theory of pluralism. But at the end of the day, yes, linkage institutions are worth protecting, but we want to be noticing that they have a large influence. And maybe in some ways, there are those who would argue it's too large an influence. That's our chapter mantra. Linkage institutions are worth protecting, but they have a large influence. As you're taking notes, just be getting down anytime you see, oh, wow, here's where the media or interest groups are having a really big influence, maybe even an outsized or overwhelming influence on our political process. So there's three things for you to check out. You want to identify the pros and cons of large interest groups. You want to describe the roles of the media, and you want to explain how changing media, including social media, influences politics. 2, you want to compare what we hear about politics with what politicians hear about us. And finally, we want to note that linkage institutions are worth protecting, but they have a large, even a very large influence on our government. I hope this helps you as you go into these chapters. Best of luck. Have a great day.